lead on it if that's okay with you, Drew.
Absolutely. Thank
Okay,
you.
no problem. All right, good morning, everyone. Appreciate you being here. Thank you for your patience as we get this set up. My name is Wendy Tarr. I'm the executive director for a nonprofit organization. I'm based in Columbus. Our organization is called Arch, Accompanying Returning Citizens with Hope. We are grateful for you to be here in this presentation on changing the system, understanding current legislation at the State House and how you can be an advocate for reform. Um, so this presentation will have three of us speaking, and we'll just go ahead and get started. Okay, hold on, let me see if I can advance my slide. Okay, great. So just for our sakes as facilitators, and just to be able to follow up with anybody who may be interested, love to put your name, your organization, and your email in the chat, in your title, I suppose, if that's relevant, in the chat, just so that we know who's here and we can have that for our notes moving forward. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get my thing to advance. Okay, we're going to start out by talking about what are some of the best practices for advocacy. Myself and my coworker, Zach Ruppel, and my other colleague here, Susan Jager from the Ohio Poverty Law Center, all three of us have been doing advocacy and public policy for a number of years. So we're excited to be able to share a little bit about our experiences with you this morning. And here are some of our best practices. So I'm going to call them out as we move along. So as we're working on advocacy, really we understand that in the criminal justice system and in reentry, a lot of the ways that our systems are set up and the types of reforms and changes and things that a lot of us are looking to see happen in order to promote healing, in order to promote restoration, education, supporting those who are incarcerated, to have positive reintegration, but also even, pretrial kind of issues. There's a lot, right, that happens in our justice system. And the way our systems are set up are a result of how our policy is set up. And so we understand that it's our values and it's our understanding of these systems that help to support it the way it is, or can help change what could be done. And appreciate everybody being on here today, because I know that folks that are in this this space today for building bridges are people who really care deeply about these systems. You either work for them professionally or you're volunteering and working with individuals who are impacted by the justice system. And so our voices and our coming together in order to understand and dissect how things are working, what's not working, what could be changed, is really critical for us to be able to educate lawmakers, to work with lawmakers. We really are, folks on these calls, and especially folks who have been directly impacted, really are the experts in what's going on. And I think sometimes we forget that. We can sometimes be timid and think, oh, well, what do I have to know about any of these things? Maybe I'm not an attorney, I'm not a lawmaker, but really our democracy and how we as citizens engage with policymakers and help them understand what it is that they're legislating about can make a huge difference. And we should not minimize that role, even though it may feel like we just have a small piece to play. As you will hear throughout this workshop, a little bit of work by some really concerned citizens who really do know things can really make a lot of difference. And in this hyper partisan world that we live in, it can be discouraging. I understand that. But hopefully today we can give you a little bit of hope and some examples of how work can be done. And I have a lot of hope, working in this type of work, especially in criminal justice reform, because there is a lot of interest amongst, at all levels of government, as well as of people of all different political persuasions to be able to still work together. And so that's one of the things that I'm excited about. That being said, we're going to go through these 5 best practices. And the first one I have on here is cater to your audience. You know, what it means to advocate is really a lot about storytelling, giving data, giving information, and making asks for what needs to change. But when we do that, we really need to first know who it is that we're talking to. Who do we need to persuade and why? And to craft our message and our information into a package that would work best for who it is that we're trying to persuade. And I know that's kind of like communications 101. This isn't groundbreaking, but I do believe that sometimes in advocacy, we may forget to kind of think that out. And you know, in the work that I've done, I've worked on a lot of different issues. And, you know, having tailored messages to different audiences and figuring out who needs to come into the room, like who will influence this, you know, person, this lawmaker, this policymaker, who do they listen to? Who do they find to be credible? And working to build those relationships so that we can effectively be heard and effectively hear their perspectives and have them see, hey, these are people who are connected to folks that I know and that I care about, because we know in the justice system that these issues touch so many Ohioans and so many Americans. It is really incumbent upon us, I think, to work to build those relationships. And so that's my first point. The second point is centering directly impacted people. I'm going to let Zach introduce himself and talk a little bit about the importance of this and why this matters so much, and what is some of the differences that can occur when we center directly impacted folks.
Thanks, Wendy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Zach Ruppel. I use he, him pronouns, and I currently serve as the Director of National Policy for JustLeadershipUSA and volunteer with the Central Ohio Restored Citizens Collaborative. Good to be here with you all today. As Wendy mentioned, the idea of centering the voice of those directly impacted is critical for a number of reasons. First of all, we need to be able to read and understand policy creation or adaptation from the lens of individuals who will be impacted by it. And try as we might, as allies, as supporters, as advocates, reading policy and advocating on behalf of returning and restored citizens versus advocating with directly impacted citizens are 2 different concepts, one much more colonialist than the other. And so we have to be, first of all, careful that we are centering our messaging, centering our efforts, and of course, centering our energy around those directly impacted leaders. A report was recently released from the Bureau of Justice Assistance that indicated that one of the new best practices that really are emerging is not just centering directly impacted individuals in advocacy, but also using our advocacy, using our community-based organizations, networks, et cetera, to actually pour into their leadership. And so it's an opportunity both to make sure that there's authenticity in our advocacy, but also to invest in that next group of leaders that can help drive a lot of the change that we all believe in and center in our work. The other reason that it's important is because we really want to continue to model to our colleagues that the best way to advocate for systems change is to bring individuals to the table as stakeholders, as constituents, as taxpayers, as voters, and to say, this is impacting me and here is how, versus we know that this is impacting the individuals we work with, because it's 2 different types of messages. The other thing that's important, and I'll use a couple examples, is that the way in which we explain policy and advocacy, it changes when you have some of that relational piece there. Wendy, did you want me to dive into the examples that I've prepared, or do you want to save that for subsequent slides?
No, we're going to save that. We're going to go to those examples.
All right. Well, there's your teaser, folks. Stay tuned for more.
Yeah, stay tuned for more. We'll get into some examples. And then I'm going to talk about a specific bill, and then Susan will talk about a specific bill. And Susan, I'm going to pass this over to you. Knowing your bottom line, when you go in to talk about an issue with any policy, oh, sorry, my camera's off. With any policy that we're working on, there is a give and take. There is compromise. There is finding common ground. There will be changes. That can be sometimes very difficult when you understand these issues and you're invested in them and you understand the ramifications of that. So when we go in, understanding kind of what is our bottom line of what we'll be willing to accept, and then where do we really need to hold that line and really push, because there's some things that we may be able to give, in order to generate support, and then there may be other things that are a bridge too far, and understanding that is really important, especially when you're talking to lawmakers. Susan, can you share just a little bit about that topic, maybe, and then give me a couple thoughts on that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure, thank you. Good morning, Susan Jagers with the Ohio Poverty Law Center. Appreciate being a part of this session. So I think Wendy is right that what you go in asking for is not always what you come out with in the end. And I will say that you have to have patience to work in the policy change arena. So it is very much a slow process, lots of patience, and you have to be ready to take small steps and achieve incremental success as you move forward to your ultimate goal. And that, and I will share an example in a few minutes how, we're making incremental progress around driver's license suspensions issues. And it's been taking a couple of years. So I'll get into a little more detail about that later. But I do think knowing what you will accept when you go in and ask is an important piece of your advocacy strategy. You want to make sure that what the policy that comes out is strong enough to not cause harm or do damage to the movement, and let policymakers think that they've done something when it's such a compromised position that it really doesn't achieve what you're asking for. So it is important to know that you are going to need to compromise. You need to take incremental steps, but at some point, it's better to have no policy than a policy that's going to set your movement backwards, or let policymakers think they've addressed the issue when they really haven't. So I do think that's a critical piece of an advocacy campaign or strategy.
Thank you. Unlikely allies. This is something that I really wanted to also focus on. Sometimes in our work, we tend to kind of be with the same people. We kind of may have people in our groups. You work in a reentry organization, you work in faith-based organization, maybe you work in a public policy organization, and you have, a particular reputation. Maybe you have a type of emphasis that you are known for, and that's going to be, important for your mission, right? You are who you are. You're there to represent your organization. And in our work, a lot of times we have relationships that we build, and so those are the natural people together, right? To say, hey, I'm working on this. I know you care about this. Let's go together and talk. Let's have this event. Let's talk to these lawmakers. And so those relationships are critical. But I think that also building partnerships or strategic partnerships around topics where you can find agreement with organizations that you maybe don't always work with, or maybe have different positions than you on other issues, but you may find some commonality on this issue. really can be a huge part of making movement forward on your issue. So, for example, like I used to work on issues of immigration. That's not the topic of this presentation today, but I'm just going to give an example. So, in my previous work, I was part of a coalition called Bibles, Badges, and Business for Immigration Reform. And what we did was we worked on bringing together faith leaders and law enforcement voices and business voices that all had various reasonings why they were interested in immigration reform, but from different vantage points. And all of those different stakeholder groups had been previously working to build relationships with policymakers on immigration. And this is work I did many years ago. So the landscape has changed some, but all working on different things to try to change our system and make it possible for more people to be able to come to fill jobs legally in the country. And we were able to really gain a lot, I will just say, gain a lot of traction, a lot of attention, a lot of media work, when you can kind of show how all these different stakeholders are convened on a specific value, on a specific policy, even on a specific bill. It doesn't have to be that you always are working on a specific bill. You could be working on, kind of messaging that sort of undergirds a specific topic. And that becomes really effective. So when we started to do that type of work, we were getting phone calls from lawmakers asking our opinions, from media asking us for statements. And so you start to demonstrate also to maybe lawmakers that you're speaking with, hey, we're all talking. So you can't necessarily peel us off or play us against each other if we're all talking together and trying to figure out, is there a bottom line that we can all hold? That will really help you in your work. It'll help you be able to be heard and be able to obtain meetings and get your message across more effectively. I think it also just generates intrigue, amongst others, they want to know what you're about. And so I just want to encourage folks, because I know that I will just say that I think sometimes we can be, I'll just speak for myself, it can be easy to become disheartened and to think we're so divided when we're not always so divided. When you talk to people, there are things that we're not divided on, that sometimes there's a perception out there that Americans are so far apart. But when you start to work with other advocates, a lot of people are very willing to be very practical and start to work together. And so I think sometimes people who haven't done this type of policy work may not have experienced that. So I just want to encourage folks, to talk to people. It's really good. Have coffee with people, ask them for a meeting, find out what they're working on, find out, what is driving them to do this work. What is it that they're most focused on? Are there bills that they're engaged with? Why are they engaged with them? And are there things that maybe they would want to work together on? And that is really part of the way that we start to move the needle. So I think it's important to highlight that. And then staffers. I think another thing that sometimes when we're new in these, some people that are new in this, if you're trying to schedule a meeting with a state legislator, for example, about a bill, we're going to talk about some of that. This topic does include, what is some of the current policy happening? And so you may be calling an office or meeting with an office and dealing with staffers and meeting with staffers. It's like, well, what is this person's role? Is this person really have any value? Do I need to really just meet with the legislator? But staffers are extremely important. So I'm going to see I don't know if Susan or Zach, if you want to comment a little bit about your experiences with this and what you may have to say about engaging with the staff.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick, Wendy. I think the one of the things to be strategic on when we're thinking about engaging with staff are keeping in mind the workload of both the person they are staffing and their role within the office as well. The other thing that's important to keep in mind that I've learned is what seniority of staff are you engaging with, because that may also impact the richness of the intel as well as the power of influence that they have with that lawmaker or that policymaker. So if you go in and you hand a briefing to the person sitting at the desk versus you hand a briefing to a legislative director, two very different types of impact potentially, as well as two very different types of conversation and information that you may be able to gather on, is the bill heading to markup? What is the chair of the committee thinking about when they will hear it for a third and final time? Are we looking at a vote before or after lame duck? Asking those kind of questions, but again, to our first point, catering it to the audience and the specificity of their role as an audience is incredibly important. Staffers are the one who help keep the electeds and the policymakers organized. What are the meetings? What are the pain points? What are the challenges? What are your constituents saying? And they really help kind of streamline and keep it high level. And so we want as advocates to be in that streamlined messaging. And so incredibly important, but also not just engaging with staffers, but knowing which level of staffer you are engaging with.
Susan, do you have any thoughts about this?
I'll just add really quickly. I work mostly at the state level, so a lawmaker may only have one or two staff people in their office, but we have found spending time educating staffers, sometimes they connect with the issue based on their personal experience or a family member's experience, and can become a real internal advocate, not only with their member, but with other staffers that they are friendly with or, work with regularly. So, never miss the opportunity to educate somebody, because they could become your champion. And we have found that with a couple of staff people who really, experienced some of the issues that we're working on and have helped us move them forward.
Absolutely. One of my recent experiences at the State House, I went into an important lawmaker's office and the staffer was there, and it was kind of like I just was dropping in. I didn't even have a meeting. Okay. I was dropping in to give some information, and they were there. I hadn't talked to them for a while, and we ended up having, I kid you not, like over an hour conversation, and I learned so many interesting things. This person started to tell me how they had a family member who was doing life in prison. And oftentimes, like, working on issues, especially when you're advocating around topics with, a lot of our folks that in criminal justice, we need to be thinking about not just low level drug offenses, but, the majority of people in our state prisons are there. We have to be working on lots of different types of looking at all the different types of convictions and even the serious felonies. And sometimes I wonder, are they going to be able to hear this? And this person was like very, very sympathetic and could understand so many of those things, and provided me a lot of useful information, not only about the legislators' perspectives and where the bill was headed, but their personal thoughts. And it was they can also give you a temperature on what's happening inside of a committee and all of these different things. So I think that staffers also do a lot of the work. A lot of times the members rely on them to educate them about what's in this legislation and what the problems are. The legislators can't, these bills can be thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. So really your staffers are critical. And I think my point here was simply just to say those relationships are as important as the conversations you'll have with the members. And also, a lot of times people in these offices will move around from office to office. You never know. They may end up in another space. They may end up in an elected position themselves. And so, you always want to treat everybody with the same level of dignity and respect. And like Zach said, gauge where they are as far as their their influence, but especially in the State House, like Susan said, there's only so many people there, so I think that's just something I just wanted to flag, because I think sometimes when you're bringing people in, you're like, oh, we're just meeting with a staffer, but I think the way we handle that is important. Okay, I'm not going to belabor that anymore. Oh gosh, I'm going backwards. Just kidding. All right, so we've got some more examples. I'm going to have Zach. So what we wanted to do was share some stories that kind of helped unpack this a little bit. Again, but this is about, how do we advocate? How are we effective advocates? And Zach, I wanted Zach to share a little bit more on his experiences working on various kind of levels around economic mobility, and what are the ways that some of these things can be explained with real life example.
Sure, thanks, Wendy. So both a high level and a local level example centered around economic mobility, but also centered around the importance of establishing relationship with the individuals that we are lobbying, with the individuals that we are collaborating with. So locally, the city of Columbus does a lot of things really well in terms of economic mobility, creation of jobs, linking to reentry resources and support. There are, however, within the city code, a number of barriers related to occupational licensing. A lot of these are to prevent John Wayne Gacy from having an ice cream truck, or someone convicted of arson selling fireworks. And I say that somewhat flippantly, but it really was the kind of fear-mongering efforts around these pieces of legislation. The problem is, as best practices with the creation of economic mobility have evolved, the policies have not. And so in a recent attempt to bring into alignment some of the mobile food vending issues that people were complaining about in the short north, the city of Columbus took a fresh look at a lot of these occupational licenses. And in particular with mobile food vending, which we know is appetizing to some individuals in their reentry to get into entrepreneurial activities. Perhaps they got their serve safe while they were incarcerated, and they say, I would love to run a food truck. We have incredible providers like ECDI here in Central Ohio that can help prepare folks for that. But the policy gets in the way. And unfortunately, what I discovered as I was reading, and I just happened to catch it in the news, was the policy was actually going to completely bar all types of felony convictions from being able to apply for these licensures, period. There was no discretion. Discretion was removed. And so because I had a relationship with the staffer that was overseeing this initiative, but not intimately aware of this particular change, and literally we're talking about a one-word change. They changed the word from may to shall, might to will. That's a big deal. And again, it goes back to what I said about we have to think about policy from the lens of directly impacted folks. You've just taken away any discretion for someone to demonstrate their own rehabilitative efforts to then pursue another rehabilitative effort, which is entrepreneurship, economic mobility, creation, and self-sustaining for longevity. So it was an issue. And because I had that relationship, I reached out and I said, what in the world are you doing? And I was able to say that because I had that relationship. And then immediately behind the scenes, I was reaching out to judges. I was reaching out to former city attorneys. I was reaching out to individuals who I had a relationship with in the reentry landscape. None of them had any idea this was happening. So we had to create some fuss. And the fuss resulted in an incredible meeting, an incredible building of new relationships. And the intention was not to create a policy that limited individuals' ability to be successful. The intention was a response to an outcry from one particular piece of the city that they felt like they needed to address. And so for those of you that followed the news about changing the hours of operation and all of that, this was swept up into that. But because of the relationship, I was able to step in and say, this is not okay. And I'm going to make noise, but I'm going to tell you that I'm going to make noise. And then we're going to address this because you have to, because I made noise. So sometimes it is figuring out behind the scenes what is appetizing for the individual and in what manner do they have to be moved for them to be able to step in and make these type of changes. And now we have the audience, we have the collaborative efforts. And I think the policy is actually over the next year going to get better instead of worse because we were able to lean in and have a difficult conversation, but we had their trust because of the relationship. The federal example that I'll give, a couple weeks ago, I had the opportunity to meet with the Civil Rights Task Force of the Department of Justice, and I met with their housing and their employment sectors. And there was some incredible conversation that in general, individuals impacted by the criminal legal system do not know the amount of resources at their disposal to file complaints for discrimination and infringement upon the civil rights that individuals with criminal convictions do still have. We are still citizens. We do still pay taxes. Hopefully we vote, and we have civil rights. And unfortunately, a lot of individuals, whether it's because of trauma or the system or colonialism, choose your reason, do not exercise those rights. The Small Business Administration has released a new opportunity for stakeholders to engage as they are working to change policy with who is and is not eligible for funding for small businesses. Traditionally, it has been if you have a criminal conviction, you are not eligible for a long period of time. And if you are eligible, they put you through a 9 to 12 month, we'll call it an inquiry of your character. And a part of that character is being able to retrieve every piece of paperwork ever filed related to your criminal conviction. It is incredibly difficult. People's business loans usually fall through in the process, and the system is doing exactly what it was designed to do. However, now that the relationship and the working relationship in particular has been established with the Department of Justice, I can now say to them, where are there going to be pain points and how can we elevate individuals' rights to file complaints as we're broadening and improving these policies? So to bundle this up, it really is incredibly important that you have that both formal and informal ability to engage with folks so that you can get those quick meetings, so that you can get a quick text about when is this being heard or how soon do I need to move. And the third and most important piece is, what do we as advocates need to elevate and in what manner so that that elected or policymaker can act in a way that works for everyone.
Thank you, Zach. I just realized that, Drew, if you could keep an eye on the chat, I can't do a lot. So if anybody's asking any questions, by the way, or you have questions, if you want to put them in the chat, we can try to make this a little bit interactive. Or Zach, or Drew, if you see anybody raising their hand, or just interrupt if there's something in the chat. Okay. All right. Just wanted to say that. Okay. I'm gonna keep moving here. And at the end, by the way, we will have contact information for all of our presenters. It's the final slide with all of our email addresses. And we would also be willing to share the PowerPoint. I assume we can. Yeah, Susan, yours is good too. Okay, so we'll share that. Okay. I wanted to share an example about another strategy, right? So so events and personal testimonies. And so our organization, Arch, this is really interesting. So we are not that old of an organization. We sort of launched Arch as a program, as an organization within our organization, I guess, in 2017. So 6 years. Within the first 2-3 years, now I had been involved in Reentry, but I hadn't really been doing, events or anything. So in a very short period of time, I think we were able to really obtain some attention on some legislation. It was really great. I think, again, part of it is hearing from different perspectives and not always the usual people that are always in the State House. In criminal justice reform, there's sort of like a set group of entities and organizations that may have lobbyists, like full-time people, right? Or people who have a lot of their time dedicated to being in these committee hearings and being around and talking to legislators and whatever. But when you kind of come in and have a little more attention from unexpected folks that they're not used to always hearing, that can create some opening. And so that's really great. So one of the things that we decided to do. And if you've ever been, I do a lot of my work also at the state. I have done a lot of my work at the state level. So if you've ever been in the State House, you may notice they have a number of spaces where organizations that work on different topics may hold events or have a lobby day where they bring, you know, people in their network, their constituents, people that are in their organization or their partnerships into the State House for a day, for an event, to educate people, and then to sort of disperse them out to offices to drop off information, to talk to legislators about a topic, about what your priorities are, maybe during that year or during that current sort of moment in the General Assembly of the type of things that people are looking at. And we were able to host one of these events. We've had 2 legislative luncheons at the State House. You can reserve a room and set up an event and do these things. And what we did with our event is we tried to really include a range of people, right? So having a formerly incarcerated people and justice involved individuals involved in the planning of this event, like at the table helping put it together, figure out what topics we wanted to work on, what we wanted to highlight, and what pieces of legislation we wanted to speak to. And then we invited lawmakers. We invited lawmakers and their staff to come have lunch with us and to sit at the table with us. And we presented a little bit about some topics and had, you know, people on the stage who had direct stories that could share them. And then we had dialogue around the tables and were able to really to really like bring different perspectives and hear and have a real conversation. And I think sometimes like we forget too that all of these folks are really, they are also just regular people, you know? And so one thing that was really exciting is one of the pieces of legislation that we focused on during our first luncheon was something where I hadn't been able to really get directly with that lawmaker yet, but it was a topic that was coming on, and the person who had sponsored the bill heard about our lunch, found out what we were talking about, and that luncheon created an opening to where I was able to be in a regular conversation with that lawmaker throughout the course of that piece of legislation moving through, and to advocate for changes and advocate for, we didn't get everything that we wanted, but we were able to minimize a lot of, we talked about minimizing the damage of what it could do. And so we were able to position ourselves as folks that really understood this topic and had a lot to bring to the table. And we were able to directly influence a pretty significant piece of legislation on criminal justice, on reentry. And so I just wanted to share that. Those personal stories matter. Sometimes pieces of legislation can be introduced just because one story, very well crafted, that explains the problem can be the impetus for them introducing something. And so we should never minimize that. You never know. You know, you may really be able to find an ally and somebody who's willing to carry a piece of legislation because you're able to really show how it impacts one person's life, but also how that is compounded right across the population of Ohio. Oh goodness, wait. All right, Susan, can you share a little bit about working in coalition? So Susan is working, and I will have you talk about your bill after this, but could you share a little bit about like working in coalition and a little bit of your experience with that, maybe an example of something that you've done?
So I think it's important that one voice can start a movement, but to really keep it going, you need lots of voices. And you need to know what voice will impact, you know, different decision makers. So in Ohio, for a while, both the House and the Senate has been controlled by one party, Republicans. So when we approach an issue, we need to make sure that we can speak to both Republicans and Democrats, and we have to think about what organizations hold sway with different members. So it may be a chair of a committee or the Speaker of the House. So it's always important to think about putting forth good policy, but also bringing in a range of voices who can advocate with you. And I will just give you one example. We worked on occupational licensing reform at the state level to change how licensing agencies could view criminal records as they considered applicants for occupational licensing. OPLC, we work with the legal aid programs across the state. So that's how our agenda is formed. Our priorities are formed by the experience of our legal aid attorneys serving their clients. So we had a particular reason for wanting that policy changed. It's because the attorneys were helping people with criminal records in their background apply for licenses and sometimes go through the appeal process. So we really wanted a different process for that. We found partners with some more business and conservative groups because they approached the issue from the businesses approached it that they needed more employees and needed people who held occupational licenses. And a conservative advocacy group approached it as it was too much government regulation and wanted to streamline the process because it was government overreach. So for all of those reasons, the coalition was working together. We made sure the right messenger met with the right lawmaker, had a variety of testimony, one-on-one meetings, media outreach, but using all those different voices and all those different reasons why a policy change was good to make that bill move through the process.
Awesome. Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay. We're going to talk about a couple of current pieces of I think I lost something, but I'm back. Okay. All right. Feminine hygiene, House Bill 30. This is a piece of legislation that's currently in a committee in the House, and it is focused on addressing the issues for access to feminine hygiene products inside of correctional facilities. Our organization does quite a bit of work inside the women's prison, and so this is something that we really felt like was really important, of course, and of course, talking to women in the institutions. And do you have my share screen?
Yeah, we lost your share screen.
Okay, I'm sorry. Glad I asked. All righty. Talking to women in the institutions and understanding how this impacts them and wanting to make sure that, it's very difficult because they're incarcerated. So making sure that these topics is something that is probably out of sight, out of mind for a lot of lawmakers, especially if they do not need feminine hygiene products in their lives. This may not be something that they're thinking about. So House Bill 30, it would require correctional facilities of all kind in the state to supply feminine hygiene products to everybody at no cost. So the bill, this is straight from the title, will require municipal and county correctional facilities and state correctional institutions to provide inmates experiencing a menstrual cycle with an adequate supply of feminine hygiene products. So this bill is a really easy one to understand. It would ensure that multiple sizes of products are provided as needed and at no cost. If you've ever been incarcerated and had this problem, you may have a lot of story about how this works, and it varies. I think what's happening, and the reason why this bill is important, is that how this is tackled in different facilities ranges, and they kind of set their own process for it. And therefore, someone's experience in one county jail may be very different than what they experience when they get to prison or when they're in a community-based correctional facility. I've heard stories where women would tell me they put all the hygiene products in a plastic bag with the soap and the shampoo and all the different stuff all in a bag, and just kind of throw it into the holding cell where a lot of women are all residing together, and it's like divvy it up and use it. And then, but like the shampoo leaks and it's all over the products, and like it's not really like measured out like for what people need. And so there's a lot of different experiences. And then there's also where people have to pay for these products. And so this is really discouraging because, you know, as we know, people really don't have money while they're incarcerated, and they have to divide up their money at the commissary for the items that they need. And if they happen to have a cycle, and God forbid a heavy cycle, you're really struggling. So this bill would help to address that. And it would require also access to showers, regardless of someone's security level. So that means even if someone's in isolation or in, the hole, so to speak, that they can't be left out of how this bill would impact them. It also requires I don't think I spelled that right, hygienic storage and containers for disposal of products, which is another issue, right? These are some of the direct quotes that we got from women about this topic who are impacted. This is something that we really want to be able to highlight with lawmakers if they are struggling to understand what's happening in our system. How stressful it is. You have to fight to get a basic need. We can't help that we have periods, so we shouldn't have to beg for feminine products. Another woman said some places charges 75 cents a pad and $15 a box of tampons. Another woman said hygiene is so hard to maintain while locked up if you don't have money, and we should have access to period products for free. This is obviously an equity issue, and a human rights issue, and an issue of public health and hygiene. And so this is something that we want to help our lawmakers prioritize. I don't think that this is hard to understand. I don't think it's hard to explain why this is important. However, and I think that this could have bipartisan support, but there's so many bills in the legislature, right? Like they have so many different things that they have to deal with. There's only a very small percentage, and maybe Susan may be able to say this. I know I should have had the number, but like of all the bills that are introduced, it's like 10% or something, and she may know. That's what my mind is telling me, is like 10% that actually get put into law. And you have 2 years. We didn't really talk about the mechanics of this, but General Assembly, they seat all this is at the state level. They seat all your lawmakers, where a lot of our justice system, especially with prisons, is dealt with at the state level. But they seat all your lawmakers. You basically have 2 years to have this piece of legislation go through committees and have different hearings and get voted on. And they have so many things that get introduced. They only have so much time. So part of our work is also putting urgency on something, so that they will schedule it, they will have votes on it, and that it can be part of that 10%. Is 10% right, Susan?
Yes, it varies like between 8 and 12% sessions. Okay. So yep, you're right on the mark.
Okay, cool. Alrighty. So for this topic, because I really wanted to give people at least a couple of actionable items, we created a sign-on letter. It is here. I will put it in the chat as well. But if people want to read this and consider signing on to it, because we would like to put some urgency on this bill. I think something that's really interesting is that if you actually dig into it, usually an indicator that something is in a good spot is when, you know, somebody will introduce a bill and they will get co-sponsors, right? They will get their colleagues to sort of put their name on it too. And that shows, hey, look, these are all the people who are like making this a priority for them individually. Okay. And it starts to show like who's kind of pushing or who's prioritizing this. And I was a little bit concerned with this bill because all of the co-sponsors were Democrat. And as Susan was saying, our state house is a supermajority run by Republicans. And so not having Republican co-sponsors can sometimes be an indicator like, okay, well, this isn't on anybody's radar. But I will say that I did talk to the lawmaker who is sponsored this bill, Latina Humphrey. She represents out of Franklin County. And she was saying they haven't really had any pushback. So that's not the problem. And they will be having hearings. So they intend to have another hearing on this bill within this month. And so it is possible that this could be moving. Once it goes through the House side, it still has to go through the Senate. And so this is something that we would really love to kind of put some energy on. And so we welcome people to look at this letter. I think one thing that's also cool to mention is that our legislature is aware of this topic insofar that they also, during our budget cycle that just completed not that long ago, they actually passed $5 million in funding to ensure that period products and feminine hygiene products will be made available at no cost to all school districts, right? All schools, charter schools, public schools, private schools would be required to have those because, you know, a lot of students and women, you know, girls that are in school that may not have financial means, may not have, and then they can miss school. And so we've seen that they made that a priority and put that in the budget, which is a great sign. So our women who are in prison, who are arguably at even a greater disadvantage because they are in wards of the state, right? They're living in congregate living, and they even have arguably less ability to have money to even buy those products. So this is something that I just wanted to highlight during our workshop. And I will again put that link in the chat. And if you put your email into the chat, we will also email this and the other action steps that's coming out of this workshop later. Oh, there's the link. And also, if anybody has, we talked about the importance of story. And so if anybody has stories about this, especially if you work in reentry, you've been in the prison, you know people who've been in the prison or anything like that, and you are like, oh my gosh, let me tell you what this was like for me, right? We would love to capture those stories and have those little snippets and have those little testimonies to utilize to bolster our ability to educate people about the implications of this. And so I welcome you all to email me, and we would love to collect that and incorporate that in our social media and maybe even inviting you to come and share that story if you're interested. Okay. Senate Bill 37. Okay, this is another bill that is currently in the State House. I'm going to pass this over to Susan and let her walk us through the information about Senate Bill 37.
Thank you, Wendy. I know we're coming up towards the end of the session, so I'll try to go quickly. You can just go to the next screen. So just a little bit about the problem that we're trying to fix. In Ohio, about 1 million drivers have a suspended license. And a driver's license driver can have multiple suspensions on their license. So we know there's more than 3 million suspensions on 1 million Ohioans' driver's license. Under Ohio law, there are 74 offenses that can result in a driver's license being suspended. And most of those have nothing to do with unsafe driving. We also know if you have your license suspended, there's a fee just to get your license back. It's a reinstatement fee. It's an administrative fee. So it's not related to the underlying reason that you had your license suspended, but you need to pay that fee to get your driver's license back. And that ranges from $15 to $600. So you can already see that just the cost to get your license back is a barrier for many people. So we've been working on this issue for a long time, since 2018. I will go quickly through the progress because I think this touches on several things that we talked about earlier. So the whole issue started with a constituent telling their lawmaker their story about having their driver's license suspended and how they could not afford to get their driver's license reinstated. The legislature passed, so this goes to knowing your bottom line, incremental progress, all of those things. The legislature passed a 6-month pilot program that allowed reinstatement fees to be waived or reduced. During that 6-month pilot program, the legal aid programs and other partners across the state worked really hard to show the need. They served 76,000 Ohioans through clinics and were able to get the average reduction of those reinstatement fees of about $789 per person. We took that data, we went back to the legislature and gained some more partners, and we made that amnesty fee program permanent. So, 2 years later, we were able to say 221,000 people took advantage of the program. Through all of that, we were able to really educate lawmakers. And now we have the opportunity to address the underlying issue, which is the reasons driver's license can be suspended. So we have this opportunity with Senate Bill 37 right now. We have bipartisan sponsors. So we have a Republican and a Democrat leading that bill. And that bill it's limited in its drafting right now to a couple of debt-related driver's license suspensions. So you can get your driver's license suspended for just, for owing money. And that's what we want to eliminate. The Road to Nowhere report that's on here, you'll have the link when you get these slides, details that 60% of all driver's license suspensions are related to owing debt. So we expect this bill to be expanded through amendments this fall because the work to educate lawmakers, they're like, why aren't we doing more? Why is this a limited bill? So the sponsors really have spent the summer hearing from people and working to draft a more comprehensive bill. So we are working with a broad range of coalition partners from the ACLU, the legal aid community, the Buckeye Institute, the Ohio State Bar Association, and state level groups, national groups, local groups, and trying to advance this policy. So we have that opportunity. I would encourage you, if you want to do work on our sign-on letter for this work, the link is in the PowerPoint, and I can add it to the chat as well. And then we are updating that website, and we will be having district-related fact sheets and talking points. So we just encourage you to check back to that website as we continue to provide that information. If you do the sign-on letter, we will include you in campaign updates as we move forward and ways that you can be involved both in talking to lawmakers in district or at the State House.
Awesome. My apologies, everybody. For some reason, I was like looking at the clock thinking I had till noon, but I guess that was not the case. So anyway, my sincere apologies, Susan. I just threw you in a really fast version. But we appreciate everybody for being here. Sorry, we went a teeny bit over. It was just a couple minutes, but here is everybody's contact information, and go ahead and write that down. And I don't know if anybody has any other questions. If I don't want to keep you, but you're welcome to jump off and go to your next workshop, or if you wanted to stay on for another minute or two, we're happy to answer any questions. And I'm putting also our letter in the chat. Thank you for being here. Does anybody have anything that you can come off of mute? Just talk openly. until they kick us out. Somebody might also drop this link. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, this is Nina Cradoff. I'm in Columbus. I can't wait to meet up with you. I was on 2 classes at once, so we definitely have to form a circle here in Franklin County. I am inquiring about specific legislation, maybe the hourly wages for individuals that are incarcerated and utilizing some of those funds for child support payments. Not that they're making really that much, but not being able to do anything more than the basics. Not that there should be an incentive for them committing a crime either. I'm not saying that there should be any kind of incentive for criminal behavior, but the fact that they are not able to really.
Oh goodness, I'm still sharing my screen. Stop it.
I'm sorry.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Is there a way maybe I can meet with you to discuss some of the concerns that are, I believe, legislative issues that would allow individuals to be compensated, whether it's going straight towards child support, individuals who need additional. Okay.
Yeah,
All
Zach,
right.
do you want to say something about that? Are you working on that? Or no? Child support?
Yeah, so is the question about revocations and driver's license related to child support, or pausing child support during incarceration, or sentencing people to
all of the above.
All of the above.
Right. So
yeah.
So once the individual parent is incarcerated, their lack of financial support is increased because their inability to get funding. So if the dollar, it's not even $1 a day, I believe it's sort of like $5 a week or something that the incarcerated individuals are allowed to make, even if
Correct.
they have a skill or trade like a barber's, that by now should have been increased to at least $1 a day. With the cost of everything is going up. So I was just wondering, is that like a legislative issue? Again, I'm not saying that there should be an incentive for individuals, but basic common sense would almost say, hey, we're killing 2 birds at the same time, when this incarceration should almost be enough. So now the child is suffering and the individual that's incarcerated isn't able to support the child. So if the wages were a little bit more, maybe they can, they would then garnish the wages of the individual that's incarcerated. I'm trying to think of a more creative way to allow the legislative people to understand that the $5 a week is just,
So
there's some people that make $9 an hour. I was informed.
Correct. So there's a couple things that I'll offer. I wanted to give a couple thoughts just before I have to jump off for a noon appointment. So there are 2 separate issues that you're raising. The first is, how do we handle child support payments, arrearage, and modification when folks are incarcerated? The other issue is the amount of state pay. Is it time to raise it? Inflation, the ability to support oneself so as not to put a burden on someone's family. You said something that's important though. You said we have to get people to understand. Getting them to understand is one thing, getting them to care is another. And I think that's where you have to know your audience. So that's the first piece. The other piece with relation to child support, however, is that the federal government does give the ability to modify child support when someone enters a period of incarceration of a certain period of time. The Department of Correction does have a streamlined process that individuals can get those modification orders in the intake process and have that adjusted down to as low as like $450 a month, all the way down to $0. At the local level, however, it really falls on the hands of correctional administrators, as well as the local child support office, to work together to get those modification orders in the hands of those individuals while they're serving that local period of incarceration. So there are kind of two different topics there, but they do work in tandem. And of course, we know that, you know, family reunification and support is easier when a father or mother a parent comes home and does not have that debt over their head. But yeah, like Wendy said, and I as well, happy to connect more on this and kind of tease out the number of different issues that complicate and work together on that.